Every once in a while I do that wrong and I press record this to the cloud and it screws up the recording a little bit. So I had to
Oh
make sure I
no.
had the right one today. And believe it or not, I've actually, instead of hitting the record button, which is right down there in the middle of the screen, I've gone over there all the way to the right corner and clicked end meeting when I meant to hit record. That's kind of embarrassing when you start off one of these, like kicking everybody off. So
Yeah.
well, thanks for doing us. It's nice to finally meet face to face. And you are Eskimo Libertarian on all forms of social media.
Yes,
And
that's correct. Yeah.
so it's 2022, and I don't want to offend anybody. Is Eskimo not an offensive term anymore?
So that was more of like a Canadian thing of like Eskimo being offensive and they prefer the term Inuit. Up here in Alaska, it's widely accepted and there's actually multiple different tribes of Eskimo. So like I'm Yupik Eskimo and there's also a Nupiaq. So there's like three main groups of Yupik, Inupiaq, and Inuit. And so when people are like, "Don't you mean Inuit?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not even part of the Inuit tribe. I'm part of the Yupik tribe." So that would be like if I went to Lower 48 and I said, you can't say Indigenous or Native American, you have to say Cherokee. And people from other tribes are going to be like, "Well, that's not what tribe we're from." So it's it's widely accepted up here. There's a lot of myths out there too, saying like it means raw meat eater or other forms. I've heard so many different stories of what it means, and the actual origins of Eskimo is it's from the Algonquins, and it means someone who laces up their snowshoes.
Interesting. Interesting. And then let's see, the Algonquin people, they were from the American Northeast, like New England area.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting how that word got applied, all the way across the Arctic.
Yeah, for sure.
But I suppose, when a lot of European explorers came up, just like they didn't really make any distinctions between the people of the plains or, the Mountain West, they probably didn't make very many distinctions amongst the people of the North.
Yeah, exactly. And like us folks along the north also look pretty similar too. Like a lot of our facial features and stuff. It's actually thought that there were two waves of people that came across the land bridge of Alaska and Russia there. And like the first group went down into the lower 48 and then the second group, which is like my group, we actually have features that are very much more similar to like the Asian folks. And so we're believed to be the second later group that went across the land bridge.
I think I've heard that before, and that kind of makes sense. So, what part of Alaska are you from, and is that where the Yupik tribe is from?
So I'm actually not living in that tribe domain. So the Yupik tribe is more on like the west coast, southern west coast area. So like if this is Alaska, it's like this big hump right here.
Okay.
And so I'm in the Matsu Valley, which is like an hour north of Anchorage, and that's where I was born, or yeah, born and raised. Live here currently, but I do visit my family and whatnot back in the home village of Eek. So
What was the name of that home village? Eek.
Eek, yeah. So the real name of the village is Eek Victoria, but not a lot of people can say it or spell it, so it's just Eek.
So when we get done, I'm going to go find that on a map. So
Yes,
what?
EEK, Alaska. Yeah,
EEK Alaska. Okay, got it. I will.
it's a real thing.
I believe you. I mean, there's a Hell, Michigan. There's a North Pole, Colorado.
Right?
There's a Miami, Oklahoma, and a Miami, Kansas. So strange things happen. So really, what I what I want to know, because I've never really actually met anybody from Alaska. I mean, I know a couple people kind of in passing, but I never actually had a chance to sit down and talk to anybody, much less a native Alaskan. So what I want to know about is your native food culture.
Yeah, yeah. I can speak mainly to the Yupik tribe on that stuff, but it's a lot of stuff from the ocean, a lot of seafood. There is some like we have caribou up here. And so for folks that don't know what caribou is, there's reindeer and caribou, and people know what reindeer are. Those are domesticated
Yeah, I mean they
caribou.
pull Santa's sleigh.
Yeah. And fun fact, so during that time of year, the males don't have antlers during that time, only the females do. And so all of Santa's reindeer are female if they
Interesting.
have the antlers, because both males and females have antlers when it comes to caribou and reindeer.
That'll probably make a few people upset.
Yep, Rudolph is a womanly. So, anyways, yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how to like go into like all the different types of food culture that we have.
Okay, so this time of year, late summer coming into fall, you guys are probably stocking up on fish.
Yeah, so we kind of finished up most of our fishing by this time. Me and my husband do as much as we can to do like subsistence hunting, fishing, and gathering. So we finished up our salmon. A lot of them are red salmon. Up here in Alaska, we have 5 different types of salmon. We have so like chum and pinks and silvers, kings, and reds. And so most of what we have are reds. That's mostly what we got. A lot of people know reds as sockeye.
Okay.
And so those are all cut up, filleted in the freezer. Uh, we just got done berry picking last weekend, so a lot of the berries are in season. Fall is starting. Like all the colors are changing. It's really nice and chill. It's like 40 to 50 degrees. So we were out there berry picking. We got blueberries, but we also have a lot of different other types of berries. We have this thing called a salmon berry, and that's where we got a lot of like our vitamin C
Okay.
uh, in the area. It's like this orange berry that looks almost like a raspberry, and it's very tart, citrusy sort of flavor.
Interesting.
Yeah, and crowberries, which is our own version of blackberries, are really small black bead-looking berries. So yeah, gathered all those up. Those are in the freezer. I like to make a gudok from them, which is kind of our own version of Eskimo ice cream.
Okay.
And traditionally, it was used like you add a bunch of seal oil, you whip it up with your hand, and then you throw berries in and you freeze it. Some tribes would actually add some sort of white fish into it too,
Okay.
and some fish oil, whip it all up, and it was like our own version of ice cream. But now they use Crisco, they don't use seal oil.
Oh,
Some
that
some
sounds
folks who are very traditional will.
oh, doing that with Crisco sounds horrible, actually.
Well, you add enough sugar, it's really good actually.
That's that's food science in a nutshell. Add enough sugar and they'll eat anything.
Right? So lots of fat, lots of sugar, and some berries for flavor, and it's really good. But anyways, moose hunting is starting, but for bow hunting, uh, and then rifle will be soon. And so moose and caribou will be ramping up pretty soon here.
Okay. Uh, Down here in the lower 48, we have seasons for things. Like, you can only hunt white-tailed deer with a bow during, these dates. I'm sure it's like that for, if I wanted to come up there to Alaska and hunt, but since you're a subsistence hunter, do they have different rules for you guys?
It depends on where we are. So we have different, I mean, Alaska is very vast, first off. There's always a season going on somewhere.
Right.
Um, but there are areas where it depends about like the Federal Subsistence Board, and then the criteria are much more loose. So depending if you are considered a federally subsistence hunter or whatever, some of these areas, it's like, oh, you can get like 10 caribou a day. And it's caribou is a pretty big animal, and these people are way out there. There are no grocery stores. And so these are true subsistence hunters, and they're not getting 10 caribou a day. Uh,
That's a little past subsistence, but you could make an argument that, there's 150 people in my extended family or clan, and we're going to take these 10 caribou and that's going to feed us for the year.
right. Exactly. So it's and again, these places are way out there. You can only get there by a bush plane. And so it depends on where you are. In my area, it's a little more urban. Anchorage is just an hour away, actually. And so it's much more restrictive in my area and the surrounding units. So
Right, because there's more people there. And I see if I the Matsu Valley, that's where most of Alaska, that's where not most of, that's where quite a bit of Alaska's like produce farming is, right?
Yeah, actually. And so the Matsu Valley was actually started by the New Deal. They brought up farmers from Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin to start farming up here and homesteading.
Okay. What do they grow?
So we do have a lot of potatoes like Yukon Golds, um,
I can
tons
imagine
of
potatoes do well.
yes, exactly. And I think when you look at like gardening and whatnot, we're level 8 or something, or like there's not a lot of stuff that like can grow up here.
Right.
I saw a chart of like what can grow up here. A lot of vegetables, but what's interesting about our growing up here is the soil is fairly virgin compared to the lower 48. We just had glaciers come through here and deposit a bunch of minerals. So, like, relatively, when you look at the geography and whatnot, it's fairly new land up here. So lots of vegetables. And then not only that, during the growing season, the sun is out like almost 24/7. So these things grow massive. We have some world record size cabbage and green beans. People grow sunflowers up here. So lots of like vegetables and flowers. Grow. Oh, peonies is another big one. We're one of the larger imports or exports of peonies. And what's also great is our peonies bloom later than the lower 48 peonies. So it extends that peony season.
That's probably something that not very many people know about Alaska is
Yeah.
export peonies to the lower 48. That's I guess, and it makes sense, the crops you're kind of describing, cool season crops that have a fairly short growing window that can tolerate a lot of cold.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, the stuff that does grow up here, man, they are massive. I love going to the Alaska State Fair and seeing, oh yeah, pumpkins. That's another one. They have massive pumpkins. But just seeing all the massive vegetables that we have, and they have the list of the world records for each one and seeing how close they are to it because they're competitive with world record size.
Oh, I can imagine. So what are food prices like? I've always heard that they're high. And when you see ads for like, Taco Bell or Domino's, they say prices may be slightly higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Like, how much is that slightly higher? Because I've heard horror stories from 3 or 4 years ago of a gallon of milk being like $8 when it was, 2.50 or $3 down here.
Yes, it is very expensive up here. So here, like where I am right here, it's definitely more expensive than lower 48. You can expect your grocery bill to be twice as much, uh, but it's not as bad as out in the villages, where that's where you're going to hear those extremely horror story stuff that goes viral on social media, like paying 10, $15 for a gallon of milk more, you know, uh, out there because first off, it has to ship up to Anchorage and then
Right.
it's got to ship out to the villages. And it's just
It's not
it's
like Alaska's got a well-developed network of interstate highways that trucks can blast down
right.
at 75 miles an hour, right? Like if they
Exactly.
want to haul a bunch, like probably the average food delivery to your hometown out there in Eek is loaded on a fairly small Cessna single engine and flown out there. And that's not necessarily the most economical mode of transportation.
Right. Yeah. So that or a barge can actually get to our village because it's close enough to the shore. But even
Okay.
still, it's we have things working against us too, like the Jones Act and whatnot, and that causes things to be much more expensive. But
Okay. Well,
it's
tell us what the Jones Act is and why it's a bad
okay.
thing for you.
So the Jones Act was made in like 1910, 1911, way back. And essentially what it is that the part that affects us is that when things are being shipped from point A to point B in the US, including Guam and Puerto Rico, uh,
And Hawaii.
and Hawaii, yeah, uh, it has to be shipped on American-made ships that are captained by Americans, have like wave the American flag. You can't use anything else. And because of that lack of competition, we are required to use these certain vessels, it has caused these prices to quite, inflate. And they without the competition, they haven't tried to make the ships any better either because we're gonna be using them anyways. They don't have any incentive to become better. And that is also why we have so much trucking in the US is because it's less expensive to use the trucking. However, it could be far less expensive to use the shipping if we got rid of the Jones Act and added that extra competition and increased the efficiency and whatnot.
I remember something within the last couple of years that like Congress had to go in and like specifically pass a carve out for a part of the Jones Act to do some disaster relief, so other ships could come in to move some cargo and do disaster relief.
Yeah, there's been a couple of different ones, especially like with drought happening in California, and we're starting to see it in other states too with drought. And the best way to ship all that water is like they fill up this big bladder and float it across the ocean, and of course they're tugging it along. Uh, and fresh water floats on top of the ocean because the ocean's salt water.
Right.
Uh, and so I've heard for that. I don't know what else specifically was used for, but yeah, it has been brought up multiple times when there are disasters or mass amounts of things need to be shipped. And they're like, oh, we're running into this. This is actually making it very expensive or very difficult to do. So,
And I think you're right. It was like 1910, 1912, somewhere around there. And it was so long ago that like the original intent of the law is gone and it's not even a thing
yes,
anymore. It's outdated. But like there's only one thing more there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program.
exactly. And not only that, something else that's interesting is Alaska wasn't even a state. Hawaii wasn't even a state in 1910. So now we're being affected by something that its intention was meant for, the few states that we had, not the now that we've spread across here, it's affecting us still.
I never thought of that. I that never occurred to me. It was 1946, 48.
I think it was 49. I could be
19...
wrong. No, 1950. I should know this. Oh my gosh, it's gonna bother me if I
Seward's
don't.
Folly. I know that. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
it's okay. I get caught out without knowing a fact every once in a while too.
59. There we go. I knew it was a
59.
9 at the end. Yep.
59. Wow.
Yeah, not that long ago.
We have a strange perception of time. Like, so where I live, this area was settled in the 1880s, 1890s. It was opened up for Homestead Act. Like this is all Homestead Act settled land. And I lived in Norfolk, Virginia for a little over 8 years, almost 9 years while I was in the Navy. And you're there, you're around Jamestown and Smithfield and Williamsburg, all the really, really old places, that have 300-400 years of history. I had a friend that bought a house that was 175 years old. Like, okay, cool. I come back to here and things are, if something's 100 years old, it's old. Like it's
Yeah.
been there a long time. And just a few weeks ago, probably, oh, I don't know, like 6 or 8 episodes ago, as the podcast goes, we talked to my friend Katie up in Cora, Wyoming. And so that's like west central Wyoming. And where Cora is, it's kind of in a bowl of a couple mountain ranges. And they didn't even get telephones and electricity in the valley until 1960. And that's in the lower 48. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the village that my family is from, they didn't get indoor plumbing until just a few years ago.
Okay. We don't need to talk about what life's like in Alaska without indoor plumbing in January, because I imagine it's not too pleasant.
It's not the most fun when you have to go to the river and get water and all that stuff. So,
Yeah. Is that what it's still like in Eek? Do you guys still have to get your own water and
it seems like most places, especially the places with elders, have faucets. and they're able to get water that way. But I don't know if all houses have that yet. It's just very recently that they have like indoor plumbing and showers and whatnot.
Okay. Um, so you threw out a term earlier. You said federal subsistence hunter, and that sounds like an official government like designation or like
Yes.
category. So what exactly is that?
So 60% of Alaska is owned by the federal government, and it's like owned, managed by the federal government. And that's a lot of land. People don't realize how big Alaska is. If you put Alaska on top of like the lower 48, we would take up 2/3 of the lower 48. And so 60% of our state is managed by the federal government, which is a lot. Uh, so they have this thing called the Federal Subsistence Board, and they have their own definition of like if you're a subsistence hunter in these areas, and these areas are like millions of acres big, and there's multiple regions of it. Then you fall under the Federal Subsistence Board, and uh, lately it's been pretty problematic. There have been people on the board that have been shutting down whole units to hunting, like, oh, there's not enough sheep, so we're gonna shut down, sheep hunting here. And we have Dall sheep up here. So those are the ones with like the big horns
Okay.
that circle around. Uh,
Are they delicious?
yes, they're very hard to get. Maybe that's why they're delicious. It's very difficult to get to those ones. Uh, so there's been multiple times that they're shutting down millions of acres, even though like just lately there was a section that they closed down to sheep hunting, even though that they got 20 people or 22 people to testify, like, no, we shouldn't close down this hunting. And there were two people that are like, I'm not seeing any sheep. We should close it down. So they closed it down. And they're allowing people, like one or two individuals in each group, to shut down hunting in the entire like millions of acres. And so lately it's been abused by that. So it's been quite frustrating actually.
I can't imagine that that is a non-elected official that's accountable to nobody.
Yeah, I don't know the exact workings of it yet, but I plan to look more into it because this was brought up by my husband, and he's, frustrated about people. Like, there's even a section close to here where it's a similar story. They closed down moose hunting and caribou hunting. Um, the guy was saying, "Oh, there's too much traffic coming through here. It's scaring all the animals away," and they shut down massive amounts. I mean, this place is like the size of Wisconsin that they shut down. So it's it's been an issue up here, and I plan to look more into it. But it's something that people don't quite realize is how much of Alaska is regulated by DC, yet we are thousands of miles away from DC. It's kind of hard to go protest at the Capitol.
Yeah, I kind of understand what it's like, feeling like you're a long ways from the capital, but you're probably 3 or 4 times as far as I am. So and I imagine your situation with Juneau is kind of the same too, because Juneau is a totally different environment. It's totally different climate, totally different politically, and probably totally different culturally. And it seems like Juneau is just down in this little itty bitty area way off in the corner, and then there's this whole big other area of Alaska to explore.
Right. It's the only way to get there is by boat or by plane. You can't drive there. And it's literally in the bottom right corner of Alaska. It's really close to Seattle, actually. And then there's the rest of Alaska. So it's quite a journey to get there. I've actually been to Juneau before. So I had to fly there when I was in high school to play high school soccer against the Juneau high school team.
Interesting. Well, tell me about that a little bit. High school sports. Like you guys just like 8 of you just hop on a Cessna and fly halfway across the state to play soccer?
Practically, yeah. We were in a little jet and our team took up most of the plane. We might as well have chartered a plane. And yeah, we flew there and played a couple games. So we played them twice and then we flew back. But we had to do that 2 years, and then another 2 years they had to fly to us. And we would play games all the way in Juneau. We also had to drive all the way to Fairbanks, which is like a 6-hour drive, and
And
we'd play
that's not
those
like an
folks up
easy
there.
6 hour drive from.
Right. And so, I mean, it's never easy being in a bus with 6 other ladies that are super hormonal in high school,
Much
to
less
be
for
fair.
6 hours down really awesome roads, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't the worst roads, but yeah, it we had to travel, and then we had to drive down to, like, Soldotna, and that's, like, a 4-hour, 4.5-hour drive, maybe 5, yeah, so we had to travel far and wide, but it's not as bad as, like, out in the villages. You have to, like, take snow machines. You folks call them snowmobiles, we call them snow machines or snow goes. Uh, the whole village will get together and drive their snow machines to the neighboring villages, so for different games.
I that's I kind of want to know more about that, but it's probably one of those things you just kind of have to experience and see, like, oh, it's the middle of December. We're gonna go hop on our snow machines and ride through the dark for 25 miles to go to this other town and play basketball.
If you're ever interested, ESPN actually did a 30-30 show, about basketball in rural Alaska because it's actually a really big thing out here, so go check that out. It's really well done.
I'll have to see if I can't find that maybe on YouTube and throw a link in the show notes because that could be that could be an interesting diversion.
Right.
So, what's food like in the winter?
So I do, go out hunting during the winter. We have oh, first off, it's hard because it's really cold, first off. And, I'm talking
Define
like negative
really
4.
cold. Negative 40?
Yeah, negative 40 without the wind chill. Depends on where you go, but when we go caribou hunting, it the wind is ripping through. We're up on top of a mountain. It's like negative 30, negative 40 at the worst, and, it sucks. You have to cover all of your skin, so I'm you only I look like a ninja, you only see my eyes. But, yeah, you definitely wanna cover all the skin that you can because it's gonna be, like, frostbite in no time at all. We use really good gear, and a lot of the animals too, they're changing color, so you see foxes and ptarmigan, they're changing their color so that they blend in with the white. I really like ptarmigan. It's kinda like a what's funny is
Is
Alaska's state
ptarmigan
bird
a
is ptarmigan.
grouse?
It's similar.
Okay.
They are different, but ptarmigan is our state bird, and we're the only state that's allowed to hunt its own state bird. And
Okay.
so they have like a body that's nice, big, plump body, and then a little tiny head. They look kind of funny, but and they're also really stupid. They'll stay there perfectly still until you're practically stepping on them, and then they're like, explode or whatever. But yeah, going hunting for those. Uh, I haven't done a lot of predator hunting, so there's fox and wolves. I would like to do that at some point, just because their fur is really nice, and I have family that can help me with sewing furs and whatnot. Uh,
There's probably not much of a market for furs, though, is there?
there definitely is. We even have this thing called Ferrandi, and it's like before the Iditarod, traditionally everyone came in, traded their furs and whatnot, and because we have some probably of the more exotic type furs, so like sea otter and other types of otter, wolves, fox, or like Arctic fox up here. And so those are really nice furs that people seek after, especially like that sea otter. I don't know if you ever felt sea otter is the softest fur you've like if you've ever pet a chinchilla, that's I
Okay.
don't know. I'm trying to think of other things that are similar. It's the softest fur you've ever felt, and it's extremely warm. If you look at the density of the hairs, it's some of the most dense, if not the most dense fur that you can find. And so very highly valuable fur. And we also have muskox fur that's woven into like a yarn. They call it quivute, and it's
And
the
muskox, that's a pretty large, that's a kind of a cow, right? 1,000 pound or so.
Yeah, it's pretty big. If you look at them, they're like big, beefy, fluffy things with like curved horns and they sound like a dinosaur. It's weird. Like I don't even, it's like this guttural dinosaur sound. It's crazy. You'd have to look it up. I can't even mimic it. But people do farm them up here.
Okay. So they can be kind of domestic, probably they can be domesticated about as well as bison can be domesticated.
Essentially, yeah, but their fur is highly valuable. And so there is a muskox farm just down the road from me, actually. So,
Interesting.
and then
Interesting.
the other direction is the reindeer farm.
Okay, so you mentioned the Iditarod sled dog race. Now I know what that is because I'm a nerd and I'm a sponge for information. So what is the Iditarod sled dog race for the people that don't know?
Yeah, so it is a 1,049-mile uh, race, a sled dog race that goes from Anchorage to Nome. And so a lot of people think that it has to do, like it has to mimic the vaccine run or the serum run from
That,
Anchorage to
that's what I've always
Nome.
heard.
That is actually a myth, and the people that developed the Iditarod, they didn't intend to do that. They intended to make 1,000-mile race, and then they added 49 miles because we're the 49th state, and it just happens to go from Anchorage to Nome. Uh, Even though a lot of people do draw that distinction, they're like, no, that's not what it's from, but it's hard to not draw that conclusion. So I don't know.
One of those things
Who
that's
knows?
just such an incredibly strong coincidence.
Right, exactly. And for those that don't know, the serum run is like in Nome, there was a sickness that broke out. They needed medicine. They could not fly anything in. They couldn't get any trains in, nothing. And so they had pretty much like a relay of sled dogs, and they each did sections. They took the serum from Anchorage to Nome and saved the whole town. It was like this big heroic thing. And a lot of people think of Balto, but actually the dog that saved everyone was Togo. And they changed it to Balto because Togo was the name of a Japanese admiral in World War
Yes.
II. And, with propaganda and whatnot, they changed the name. So
Hmm. I
anyways,
guess
yeah, the Iditarod is a race. It's not a relay race like the vaccine run. You do the whole thing yourself. So
it's 1,049 miles. Now, how
yes.
long, like the winner does it in what, like a couple of days?
Yeah, he does it in like 7 days. It takes like a week, I would say. I haven't been looking at times lately. They've been getting faster and faster.
So a week to 10 days, like not even the guys that are really pushing hard up front. Like some of these guys are out there for 10 days
Hmm.
in the bush, in the snow, mostly in the dark, with
Yes.
everything they need for them and their dogs on the sled.
There are checkpoints. So checkpoints where they can drop supplies and whatnot.
Right,
So
but they've got to keep at least a couple of days food with them, for them
yes.
and their dogs
Yes.
and water.
Yeah.
And they're hauling all of this crap 1,049 miles across the Arctic.
Yes.
Like, yeah, Kobe Bryant, go throw your ball.
Right. Yeah. It's insane what they do. And a lot of people think that this is hard on the dogs. But the thing is, these dogs, they do work hard, but because they have a purpose and a job, and this is what they're designed to do, they're some of the happiest dogs you've ever met.
There's nothing happier than a dog doing the job that it's been taught to do.
Yeah, they feel like they have a sense of purpose, and it's actually been shown when dogs don't have a sense of purpose, they get depressed.
So, actually, I had kind of interesting conversation the other night. And I didn't really intend to go this way, but we were talking about dogs.
Mhm.
And so, like 150 years ago, before we had, processed bag dog food, how many people would have had dogs 150, 200 years ago? Your average tradesperson probably would not have had a dog. The outdoorsman, the people that raise livestock, cared for livestock, would probably have dogs. And then the upper class may have dogs, right?
True. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
And the and I part of this conversation, I was thinking about, preparing for this interview, and I was thinking about, how they do things up in, northern Canada, up in Alaska. Y'all have a lot of sled dogs. And sled dogs have been a part of native culture for a long time. And my theory is this, because there's a lot of animals up there that are good for, that are good for hunting, that are very rich in fat. So there's an economical fuel source for sled dogs available up there. And that's why a lot of the transportation in the north has been sled dogs. Does that do I have
Yeah,
any of that anywhere close to right?
I would say so. Yeah, it was convenient. I mean, being able to haul things. Another thing is we're very nomadic people. And so being able to haul stuff is very valuable. And so being able to have a companion that can help haul your materials, and like the elderly and, the pregnant and the small children and whatnot is very valuable for a nomadic lifestyle.
Before the Plains Indians got the horse, they they would use dogs and little travois, like little, just two little poles. They'd pull behind the dog, and I mean, I can't imagine that a 40 or 50 pound dog would be able to pull a whole lot across the plains, powered on a diet that they'd be able to get out here. I mean, certainly they wouldn't be as strong as one that's been raised on whale fat and seal meat for a long time.
Exactly. Yeah. Our food is very rich. It's a very like keto diet type, a lot of protein, a lot of fat, a lot of fat. And it's kind of interesting. Like I've actually tried the keto diet and it actually really agreed with me and I felt great. But I really like donuts and ice cream. So it's difficult to stay on it. But
I can
no, it's
empathize.
right. And like earlier, I had mentioned seal oil. It's a very valuable part of the diet. A lot of energy stored in there. And seal oil was used in a lot of different foods. You could like dip your dried fish into it, dried meats like dried caribou into seal oil. You can whip it up and make your own like Eskimo ice cream, as I mentioned, aguda. Um, very valuable. And that was much more of our region. We didn't have as much whaling in our tribe. That's more of like northern Yupik, Inupiaq area. They would have more of the whaling, but we had a lot of seal, and that's what we would do. And a lot of salmon too. Salmon's really good.
Because where your people are from, they didn't have whales, they had seals. The whales are all farther up the coast, right?
Yeah, yeah. Very rarely. I mean, you hear of like a beluga. Those will hit like some of our areas and can actually get up the river a little easier, but they're a smaller whale.
So how would food preservation work without electricity?
There is a lot of cold curing. So, like there's this example where you cut up salmon, you cut it up and then you soak it in like a brine
Okay.
and then you bury it underground for a certain amount of time and you cold cure it. And it's similar process as how sushi is made. And so with that cold cure, then you dig it back up, unravel it, you clean out the brine so it's not so salty and whatnot and it's preserved like that. Another way is drying. You can dry stuff, you can smoke it. And I mean, the winter is a freezer as it is.
Right.
So that helps a lot.
I
Uh,
I kind of almost wrote down the dumb question, how do you keep your meat fresh in the winter? And then I like, oh, wait a minute. What's the average winter temperature in Alaska? Just put it
exactly. So
outside.
that helps. But in order to get it to that point, a lot of drying, cold curing is done. Now what we do, I mean, we have like vacuum sealers. Uh, I do have family that still dries fish, and I love dry fish. It's just like a salmon as a jerky, but it's very oily, and I love it. I love that stuff.
You ever have a moment of weakness and buy salmon from the grocery store?
Never,
Never?
never.
Not even when
When
you're
I was in the lower 48, I did.
okay, great.
But here, no, we are pretty good at our fishing.
But
And
so you're a
uh,
wild caught girl and you
yeah,
had some store bought. How much of a difference did you notice?
oh, so much. The color. First off, the color, like, so our salmon is very red and vibrant and just beautiful color. And then the store-bought was like a pink, I don't know, looks sick in comparison. Like you shouldn't be that color. And also the taste, like here the taste is just rich and you don't need any seasoning. You don't need tartar sauce. It's just it's good. And then with the store-bought stuff, I'm like, "Oh, that's why they use tartar sauce, or that's why they use seasoning." Like, it's bad.
Covered up with ketchup or something else sweet.
Right? So, the flavor is just so much better, and I also, like, feel good, there's I'm very in tune with, like, when I hunt and fish my own food, how much better I feel compared to having store-bought, like, either steaks or salmon or whatnot.
Okay. Let's chase that rabbit a little bit. Do you think that is that because of it's a more nutrient dense food or because you have a more intimate connection with that food and you respect it because you're the one that harvested it?
I think there is a mixture of both. If you look at like practices of farmed salmon versus wild caught salmon and what their diets are, I I mean, I'm not a biologist by any means. I'm actually just an engineer. Uh, so, but I mean, the fact that your food looks so different, tastes so different, there's got to be a difference. And like, I also like the comparison of steak. I don't normally eat beef. I eat caribou steak and moose steak. And so that is something that agrees with my body a whole bunch more than like beef steak, even though like having a beef steak does taste good every once in a while.
And I was going to ask, you haven't mentioned eating any beef, and probably most of my listeners are primarily beef eaters, and they're thinking about eating caribou and seal fat, and they're going, maybe, but they're thinking about that ribeye later, right?
Right.
Um, so what's been your experience with beef? Like, have you gotten
Uh,
any straight off a farm, or are you just mostly out of a grocery store or restaurant?
I haven't gotten it off a farm, though I would like to do that, but it's a little more tough up here.
Right.
So most of my stuff has been from the grocery store, and I'm sure most of your listeners are like cringing, like, that's why, So
But you eat
that's
bear,
really
so like they
yes.
can suck it.
Right. I catch most of my food, so there.
Yeah, you probably hunt your own bear too, so
Yeah, actually, there's 3 bear pelts sitting over there.
awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, nobody can give you any crap about buying beef at the store if you're out hunting bear. I'm sorry. It's just that's how it's gonna work. That's how it's gonna
Okay.
be.
That's good. I like that.
So when is bear season?
So it depends. There are different types of bears that you can be getting. So first off, there will be spring bear that's freshly coming out of its hibernation cave or whatnot. They haven't eaten a lot, but their meat is very, very tender. And
Okay.
so that's a good bear to get. Uh, and you can either get black bear or brown bear at that point. And then
Are
later
brown bears
on,
also Kodiak bear?
so that's a Kodiak grizzly.
Okay.
There's supposedly a difference between brown and grizzly. Again, I'm not a biologist, I'm just a
Right.
hunter. uh, but it depends on where you go and their diet. Oh my gosh, those Kodiak grizzlies, though, those things are massive. And I can't even like emphasize enough how massive those animals are
Like
because they're,
8, 9 feet.
oh, they're huge. Just, yeah, probably about that big, if not bigger. And then not only that, they're just round and they look so cute, but I'm telling
Until
you
they
that's all
stand up
muscle.
and scream at you?
Right, exactly. They're little cute round ears and they're all fluffy and they got big butts and whatever, and it's just so cute, but no, they're absolutely terrifying. I'm not really selling it well, but they're terrifying. Uh, and then later on in the year, so kind of like closer to this time of year, I would still wait a little bit longer when there are blackberries that have been sitting in blueberry patches and been eating nothing but blueberries for a few weeks. A blueberry bear is amazing. Like it affects the flavor of the meat. Their fat is purple from the blueberries. Yes, it's
Okay.
literally purple. So you can like throw some fat. They have a lot of fat on them. So you take huge chunk of fat, throw it in the pan, get it all melted, and then you throw some slabs of meat on there and you like fry it in its own fat and it's blueberry fat. Oh, it's so good.
You probably don't need to eat very much of that to keep you going for a couple of days.
No, no, not at all. It's like it's a type of full where you're not feeling like bogged down and like, oh man. It's like you have good energy and you feel warm and you can go do things, you know.
Wow. Yeah. So, what do you hunt bear with? What do you take with you when you go hunt bear?
So luckily it's mainly my husband that's hunting. Um, I I have a CVA Cascade and
Is that that's a muzzle loader?
no, so this one isn't. I know CVA is known for their muzzle loaders, but
Right.
this one isn't. So, which I was kind of surprised. I won it actually at an outdoor banquet, the Alaska Outdoor Banquet. Uh, so
Still black
yeah,
powder though.
no, so
No.
it's yeah. So, uh, I was really, I don't know. I don't know if they're like branching into something and, branching out of what they do currently and just trying this out. So, anyways, my husband. Oh man, what does he use? He keeps changing it up on me and he's like, "Wouldn't it be nice if I got this round or if I got this gun?" And so I don't know which ones he's gotten lately. Scared to go look.
Sounds like every other hunter I know.
Right. Or I see a receipt and I'm like, "Did you go to Sportsman's?" He's like, "Oh, no, that was last month." "Oh, you went to Sportsman's last month. Oh, okay."
I kind of had to have an awkward conversation with my reader of the credit card statements not too long ago. I bought a mental health firearm for myself and neglected to mention it to her before the credit card statement showed up. She came and was like, what's this? Uh, I bought a gun.
Oh my gosh, I might have to share that with my husband. He would love that.
Mental health firearm purchase.
Right? Or it's like, "Oh, it's our anniversary. I got myself a gun."
Yeah. All right, I got this new one, so now you could carry this one of mine that you liked.
Right?
Yeah,
It's a his and hers matching set. No, exactly. So, I would have to ask my husband more of what rounds he does, but, 'cause he'll go out there usually for the bears. I am more of the caribou and, I mean, I've gone moose hunting before, but it's been a few years, so I'm a new mom, and so juggling that and getting back into the hunting scene, I've been doing much more of the easier hunts lately. So,
fair
and
enough.
fishing. Fishing's easy to do with a baby.
So what's it like in the winter? So as we're recording this, kind of, what is it, mid-August? It'll be. I'm actually kind of ahead. I'm doing good, so it'll be like down into September by the time this one comes out. What's the daylight like? I mean, obviously days are getting shorter. Do you have full dark in Anchorage?
Not full dark, but the sun will like just barely make it above the horizon and just hover there and then go back down. And it's not a lot. And so it's still pretty dark. It's not full daylight light. It's kind of, if you aren't staying active, it can be very depressing.
So how do you guys fight that? You just go out and hunt all winter and fish?
Yeah, we go out hunting. We do a bunch of activities, whether it's cross country skiing or snowshoeing. Lately, I've been doing a lot more snowshoeing because that's easier to do with a baby on the back. Uh, but we should be able to get more into skiing. I've seen people who cross country ski with a baby on them. I'm like, nope, that's not for me. So that would be a little too difficult for me. Uh,
Cross country skiing is one of those activities that sounds and looks deceptively easy.
it's difficult. Luckily, I competed in high school, so I have some experience, but I still would not want to have a baby on me because I know of some of the crashes that I've had, and that would not end up well.
Okay, you competed in cross country skiing in high school.
Yes.
I guess that makes complete sense because it'd probably be kind of hard to have a lot of track and field events in Alaska.
I mean, that's in the fall or in the spring, but Yeah, so there's cross country running in the fall that a lot of folks did, and then they went right into cross country skiing, and then they go into track. That's what a lot of folks did, but I did cross country running, cross country skiing, and then soccer. So
Okay, now I gotta know what other really weird winter sports do y'all do up there?
there's also
Not
the
really
NYO.
weird, I guess, like, they're not gonna be
Right,
weird, just, like,
unique.
uncommon. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the NYO, which is the Native Youth Olympics, and that is like actual like traditional games and contests that different varying tribes had. And so like
You have
there's
to
this
tell me all
one.
about this. It sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So there's this one where like you suspend a ball and you have to like jump up with both feet and hit it with both feet and land on your feet. And they try to increase the height of that ball. And so I think the record is like 8 feet the ball was. And if you see these people jump, I mean, they're jumping, their feet hit go above their head and they still land. And there's different variations of it too. But yeah, that's like the 2 foot high kick. There's this one where you start on the ground and you have to hold on to one of your feet, and then the other foot hits the ball, and you have to land on that same foot, and your hand is on the ground, and you it kind of looks like you're in the crab position the whole time. But yeah,
Okay.
people will be hitting like 6 feet up in the air and doing practically like jumping up into a one-handed handstand to reach their foot all the way to it. It's crazy. You got to look this stuff up.
I I'm yeah, Native Youth Olympics?
Yep. Either Native Youth Olympics or the adult version is the WEIO, the World Eskimo Indian Olympics.
WEIO. That's a big salad of vowels that I just about didn't parse correctly.
That's okay. But yeah, that is something that is very unique up here.
Very cool. Um, couple other things that I kinda had written down here and, I will actually stay true to my word. If you don't wanna talk about it, we can edit this out, but,
Okay.
like the Indian Adoption Project and the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. Can you maybe unpack some of those and what they were, what they were supposed to do, and how bad they are today?
Yeah, I can go into that. So, firstly, the Indian Adoption Project. So, that was something that was put forward by US Congress and specifically written in the project. They practically quoted that the purpose of this project is to take, uh, they use the term Indian children and putting them in non-Indian homes. They specifically wrote that out. That was the intention of the project. Uh, So basically, they set up this criteria of when they could come in and take Native children from their homes, and it was
Forcefully?
pretty yes. So they're like, if you resisted, you went to prison type of thing, and pretty much so they came in some of the criteria included things like, too many people in the home. We'll see, if you look at multiple different cultures, a lot of people have homes that are filled with family that aren't just the nuclear family of mom, dad, and children. They'll have aunts, uncles, multiple generations like grandma and grandpa, cousins and whatnot. And that's normal for a lot of different cultures, including Native American cultures. So someone would come in, see that there's multiple generations or too many people, as they put it, and take the children. And that was a double standard. If they saw Native families with that, they would go in and take the children. Another thing is indoor plumbing. If there isn't indoor plumbing, they can take the children. The thing is, when this was implemented in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of like rural places that didn't have like indoor plumbing at that time.
And even now in 2022, indoor
Yeah.
plumbing is simply not practical in large parts of Alaska because you can't put a pipe in the dirt.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Not only like with permafrost and stuff, we also have earthquakes, and it's a very difficult engineering task to overcome. So, and it costs a lot of money. So, uh, and there were multiple like different folks like in farming communities during that time that didn't have like indoor plumbing. at least to the standards that they were talking about. But if it was a native family without indoor plumbing, they could take the children. So there were multiple different criteria like that where it was a double standard, vaguely written, like vaguely enough written that they could take any children they wanted. And they took a lot of children by 19, I believe it was 63. I don't have my notes on me. Uh, 1 in 4 Native children were living away from their family. That's 25% of Native children away from their family. It's an insane number. And so these children were sold to predominantly white suburban families. And how that happened too is they
You
took
just
out,
said sold.
yeah,
Like literally the government would confiscate them, confiscate the child, and then sell them with an exchange of currency to a white family.
yes,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we were crystal clear that wasn't okay. Go on. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, for sure. Like all the paperwork and fees and everything associated with being, the adoption is going to the government and funding this program. So there was an exchange of currency, and
I bet
it's
there's 300 million people living in America that don't know this crap was happening 70 years ago.
exactly. And people are still alive today that are victims of this, you know. And so like people that were like given to adopting families, and how they were able to be so successful, like one of the reasons is the government made these ads in like Good Housekeeping magazines and whatnot that were predominantly going to white suburban neighborhoods, saying that there are all these native children, they need loving homes, and they're the unwanted or the forgotten child, and pulling at the heartstrings of all these families. And they're like, yes, we'll take in these children, these poor, poor children. And that's how they were able to be so successful. So that was the Indian adoption project. And even still today, uh, Native children are 4 times more likely to be taken to go into the system, like foster and adoption and whatnot, than white children. It's still like,
Is that a national statistic you're quoting or just for
yes,
Alaska? Okay.
that's a national statistic. And so that's still an issue today, even though uh, ICWA was put into place, and that was the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so a lot of times in the news and whatnot, they refer to it as ICWA. And so that um, essentially it made it harder to deem that a child needed to be taken. And then also, if a child should be taken, there was a criteria or there was a list of who the child can go to, and you had to go down the list. And so first off, it was the child had to go to family. And if that wasn't available, the child had to go to another family that was within the same tribe. And if that wasn't available, it had to go to a Native American family, just in general, even if it's not from a different tribe. And there's this part gets kind of iffy, like if the parent approves of a fostering parent that isn't uh, part of that list, then it's okay. And there's ways to go around it kind of. But this was so that Native children stayed within the community, weren't being sent away so far and to predominantly non-Native homes. So
Sounds like an efficient, well-run government program that accomplished its objectives.
pretty much it really did. And so it's very sad seeing the residual effects of it. I'm part of the generation of Native Americans that are trying to reconnect with our culture and language, values, and whatnot. So we're definitely seeing much more of a shift of coming back and trying to relearn everything.
And I think that's true in a lot of different ways. It almost seems like just generationally we've gotten kind of fed up with the current system and we all want to relearn some old ways. We want to relearn how to better, live in harmony with our environment without completely destroying everything. You know, there's some modern conveniences that are awful nice. Air conditioning for me, I'm sure like oil heat for y'all up there, you know, that makes life a lot more tolerable in our environments. Um, but at the same time, we've got to maybe learn to live a little bit in a little bit better balance with the resources that are available to us and make better use. Um,
Absolutely.
so we talked about beef earlier, and like everybody's seen the show with the Kilchers. What is it called? I forget. They're out by Homer and they have a cattle ranch. Like you
Oh,
seriously?
you know what's really funny actually? So I just gotta say really quick, a lot of people are like, "Oh, have you seen this Alaskan show?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't seen any of them."
I
So,
get that. I thought you might at least be, kind of familiar with who I was talking about. But anyway, I don't watch the show either.
okay,
I don't watch a lot of TV, so it's cool.
that's fair.
Um, but I've watched, three or four enough to know that they have cows and they raise cows.
Mhm.
And I would assume that, when you have a bear or caribou, like you're out there, you're disassembling it so you can pack the thing out of the woods. Um, so if somebody had an animal they wanted to go get processed, like, or they had a cow they wanted to go get processed, is there anywhere in Alaska that you can take an animal to like a USDA plant and have it disassembled?
There's plenty of places around here that will do the cutting up for you because we also get a lot of tourists
Right.
and like they want their stuff handled. A lot of them are like, "Oh, icky," you know. But we even take some stuff to different meat processing places. It's these like small mom and pop meat processing because they have really good recipes. So, like caribou brats. If you go to Indian Valley Meats, they have the best caribou brat recipe ever. We love it. We can't do it well ourselves, so we'll pay the money to have someone do it for us, and it's a really great price. And also, like they took some of the bear meat, made some bear bacon, and I don't whenever I have pig, it really upsets my stomach, including bacon, but I can have bear bacon. And so
That's fair.
that stuff's really good, or like pastrami cut, some of the more specialty type meat stuff.
I'll say that there is a massive difference in pastured pork bacon and industrial CAFO bacon. Like
Okay, that's fair.
I can't tolerate the CAFO bacon as well as I can tolerate the pastured pig bacon. I mean, it doesn't upset my stomach, doesn't make me run to the bathroom or anything, but my stomach knows. I mean, it definitely knows when I'm eating, hamburger from the grocery store or whether, it's something we got for one of my friends.
For
Same with
sure.
pork, same with chicken too.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably why I've had trouble with having like pork and whatnot, or any sort of like pig products is where it's coming from. And I would be totally willing to try, from a farm or from a local farm type deal. But yeah, there are places up here that will do cuts for you, like, filleting fish, cutting up different animals, or doing some of those specialty type meat process type stuff. So
Okay. Very cool. So I guess we'll kind of cruise in to the second part of your name, Eskimo Libertarian,
yeah,
without getting too horribly overtly political. Um, I guess you communicate extremely well on Facebook with memes. Like I, every time I see a meme on Facebook, it usually has Eskimo Libertarian, as the credit down in the corner.
thank you.
So maybe like what is a libertarian and what isn't a libertarian?
Yeah, I would say libertarian is someone who advocates for far less government than what we have, and looking at things in terms of like consenting to different government type stuff. Like being able to opt out of government things would be a libertarian idea. And so it's also the idea of like, don't hurt others, don't take their stuff, kind of leave each other alone, uh, sort of things. And so it's the idea that government has come in and really messed things up, destroyed different industries, uh, and is not the best solution for these things, and the best person for the solution is yourself. So, that's kind of like libertarianism in a nutshell, I would say. And I started my page because like COVID hit and I didn't realize that government had the powers that they were using. Like I'm like, "Oh, the government is able to do that?" Like they're allowed to do that, and then it made me realize I need to pay attention. And the more I paid attention, the more I was like, "Okay, something needs to be done." So, like any good millennial, I started a meme page. So but, I also do a lot of, like, volunteering, like, volunteerist sort of, activities. I already was a big advocate on volunteering for your community and whatnot, and I had those libertarian tendencies. I was a libertarian, just didn't know it yet type of thing.
I think there's a lot of people that are and are tricked into voting for one of the other 2 teams because
Yeah,
the word's just not getting out there.
essentially, and so that's what I'm hoping with these memes, like, using humor and like or something that just grabs your attention because on social media you only have a very short window to grab someone's attention, and so being able to grab their attention and like convince them with humor has been the most effective means I've seen with spreading the movement.
I'm not a very funny guy, which is why I gotta sit down and do this for 2 hours to get some content.
That's fair. It's okay. It took a lot to get to refine my art or whatever.
It and it is. It's an interesting process, like, as your page grows, your audience grows, you know, you kinda branch and you try different messages or you try different formats, and, once your audience kinda gets that critical mass, you start getting enough feedback regularly, you're like, "Okay, now I know what's working. Now I know what's working," and then, the success just builds on the success. I kinda feel like I'm maybe about a half a step away from that.
That's fair. Yeah, I definitely do get feedback, and when a post flops, I'm like, "Oh man, that didn't do well. That didn't land right."
Yeah.
And I've also like sprinkled in there living in Alaska type stuff because people are always wanting to learn more. So
Well, I mean, for sure. So, how does how does being let me back up. So it sounds like, when COVID hit, you came to the realization while you're watching a government, you know, take all this overreach, shut things down, enforce authority on private businesses that they shouldn't have the authority to enforce. From my point of view, you know, the government only has as much power as we let them. And payable by fine means legal for a price. I mean, so there's 2 kinds of laws, payable by fine, which means legal for a price, or they're gonna threaten you with court. And even if they threaten you with court and it's, a misdemeanor, you don't show up for court, a guy with a gun is gonna show up and throw you in a box. Like, that's the end result, payable by fine or a guy with a gun shows up to throw you in a box.
right,
And, like, okay, so wearing a mask is a law now. Wait a minute. You're gonna call a guy to come here and pull a gun on me because I don't wanna put a piece of cloth on my face? That doesn't make sense. Like, that's not an effective use of public resources. And I think that a lot of us really started to question things in March of 2020. You know, why are we allowing this? And the really scary part is there's there's tens of millions of Americans that were cheering for it.
exactly. We didn't see that as much up here. So up here, there was a different mindset. There were people that were trying to put restrictions, like for example, one of the more Alaskan reason or examples is they tried shutting down bear hunting. You're gonna tell me I can't go out in the woods and go bear hunting because I might get COVID from the bears? Like
Really?
we are as social distance as it you could possibly get. I can guarantee you most of the US aren't this social distance. And so examples like that coming out of our governing body. Luckily, a lot of people stood up and were like, "No, this is not gonna happen." And, our elected officials listened to us. They're like, "Okay, you're right, you can go bear hunting." Geez. So,
You're
uh,
right. That maybe was kind of stupid.
Exactly. So that was like some of the examples that we had up here of government coming in being like, this is for your safety. You can't go bear hunting. It's
If you're still there, you're frozen and I don't have audio. Gonna pause the Zoom now. No, I'll leave it running for a few minutes. You might show back up.